Right. Welcome, Caroline, to the Charity Hub podcast. This is our second one, so I'm really looking forward to this and getting into learning a little bit more about you. Firstly, let's start off. Introduce yourself and a little bit about yourself.
So my name's Caroline Lee. I am the Senior Social Value Advisor at VolkerRail. I've been in social value for about 9 years, 8.5, 9 years. I joined VolkerRail in July last year. For me, it was a natural step up. So I was working for a small organisation before and I love to help people, but there's only so much you can do with small. So I've gone to a much larger company that not only gives me more opportunities, but they have that full support. So to me, I'm able to do what I really enjoy doing. I'm a big advocate of collaboration and helping people. I have worked in the third sector before, so I understand a lot of the charity constraints and challenges. I also believe in doing what I try and ask other people to do, so I'm a big believer in volunteering. So been involved in school governance for over 10 years. So I'm a chair of governors at a primary school in Doncaster area and a vice chair in one in Rotherham. And I also volunteer for Grimm & Co, which is a children's charity doing illustrations.
Okay, so not much as usual. So you just mentioned there about a little bit of your past, and I know you were involved in charity. Do you want to just talk about that a little bit and where your experiences come from?
So if I just skip back a bit, so I was a bit of an IT geek, so my starting out in world was at IT, and then my first step into charity was at Darts, Doncaster Community Arts, so part-time, front of house, but doing a bit of extra things because I had skills, so like I helped with them with some of their leaflets and a bit of things like that. And then after that I worked for, it was known as SICE at the time, which was South Yorkshire Centre for Inclusive Living, but it's now Live Inclusive.
That's a long title.
Yes, and I did an 18-month project called Silver Lining Connect, which was using the internet and social media to combat social isolation. So I was only targeted to help 6 people,
right?
But I helped closer to 30 because I had a core group of users that I could provide a tablet for, but I was very firm to say actually people that already have tablets could get the same support.
Yeah.
So we did a 2-layered approach, so we smashed our targets basically.
Of course you did. Not expect anything less. So do I take it are you Doncaster born and bred? Have you raised around here? Tell us a little bit about that.
I was actually born in Scotland.
Right.
I won't bore you with the detail, but basically, long story short, my parents were going to split up. I was going to go in a children's home. My great aunt said, I'm not having a family member doing that. So took her son and daughter to Scotland to pick something up. Didn't tell them until they crossed the border it was a baby. I lived with them since. So effectively, my mum and dad were my biological dad's cousin.
Right, okay.
But we have a strong resemblance. I've always known, and I've always been part of that family. So I was down here from 13 months.
Oh, right. Okay.
So I've not quite born, but definitely bred.
Yeah, definitely done it. And how have you found that growing up in Doncaster? Because I think it's a very different experience to everyone I speak to.
Yeah. And I think growing up, so I grew up in Conisbrough, ex-mining community, so quite a lot of deprivation, and it's not just money deprivation, it's aspiration deprivation, because you've got a lot of family there that are second or third generation where their parents and their grandparents were on benefits, or they were in jobs where there wasn't that long-term prospect. So for me, that's why I'm so passionate about using the power of what I have in my current role to help other people, because I've come from that. And one of the worst phrases I've ever heard, because I used to run a youth group in Conisbrough, was the kids saying, I can't do that because I'm from Conisbrough, or I can't do that because I'm from Doncaster. And my argument was, well, I was, but I've got where I've got. So it shouldn't be, your location shouldn't define your choices.
No.
But what we as organisations and people that do things like social value and charity work is empowering those young people to challenge themselves on that, and actually nothing should be off the table.
Absolutely. And I think, again, there's enough success stories that have actually come out of Doncaster to prove them wrong. I couldn't agree more with that. So how do you see your role and how that benefits charities and CICs in the area?
So with social value, so just in case people don't know what it is, so any company that uses anything to do with public money, so as a rail company, VolkerRail major client is Network Rail, who gets their funding from the Department for Transport, and Department for Transport would be public money.
Yeah.
They have a legal obligation to do social value. So there's a model called the PPN 06 social value model that lays out a series of recommendations and metrics that they should be looking at. Now, VolkerRail, even before I started, I've always had a strong social value presence because they know it's the right thing to do. So from a corporate level, without even considering contracts, everyone's entitled to a day's volunteering. There is a fund where employees can apply for funding from anything from support a local charity to my kids in a grassroots football club, I'd like to buy some kit.
Yeah.
But then on a contractual level, depending on the size of that contract and the value, there will also be an obligation to return a social return on investment. So they used to say a good practice would be a 10% return.
Okay.
We're often much higher than that.
Yeah.
And for me, social value is a very good tool. There are organisations out there that might use it as a tick box exercise because they'll get the targets, but it's just that short-term view, whereas if you do it properly, it's leaving that positive lasting legacy. And that's why I'm really keen to make sure that the stuff that we do is linked back to the charities that need things. So what's really important to us is wherever we're doing any work is that real local area needs analysis to understand which charities are out there. Things like the Charity Hub are invaluable to us because that is a place where I'm already socialising with charities that I can find out, even inside conversations, oh, well, actually, we could help with that.
Yeah.
And to me, it's got to be that way because, you could just go to the big national companies and say, right, we'll just donate some money to Macmillan once a year, or we'll just tap into some national thing. But actually, if you really want to make a real lasting legacy, it's got to be at that local level.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more with that one either. I knew this was going to be an easy conversation. So one of the things obviously we're trying to do around at the Hub is create this collaboration and conversation between the sector and businesses. How can charity CICs engage with people sort of in your position and people in a similar role within companies?
So for me, it has to be a two-way process. So as much as, yes, it's good for charities to reach out, the people in my role should be doing that legwork as well. So I get feedback from other people that's doing a similar role to me in different industries and different sectors, how hard it is to find the right charities to... But to me, it shouldn't be hard.
It's not.
Because if you've done your proper local area needs analysis and you know what's out there, it's literally having conversations.
Yeah.
And without those conversations, nothing will happen. One good thing in the rail industry is social value is a real passion across the industry. And there's a real collaboration aspect to that. And for me, making sure you're doing that in tandem with the charity that you're trying to support, because one of the things you need to avoid is making that assumption that, right, that charity needs this. Actually, you say to the charity, what do you need?
Yeah.
One thing I will say for charities as a general advice, sometimes for us, say that we're going into a different area that we've never worked before. If we're tendering for that work, we will contact charities in advance to say we might be in that area, what we'd like to do. Charities find it really hard to think of long-term wish lists.
Yeah.
So they'll give us a load of things that they need doing, but it needs doing now.
Yeah.
So I think the advice to charities is have what you need now, because I know charities always need that, but have in the back of your mind, if, for instance, a company came along and offered us resource and time and materials, what would benefit? And it doesn't matter how pie in the sky it might sound at the time, that's the kind of thing that companies like us can grab hold of and plan for and say, well, actually, if we get that work, that's what we could look at doing.
Would you say companies like yours or people in your role then would be actually more attracted to something that has a longer term goal or maybe a bigger achievement to want to bring into their community by what they're doing by not being a short term project? Because that's one of the things I want to try and get some of the companies to look at, because a lot of it is 1 year support, which is great and is always needed, but I don't think the charities or the businesses themselves see the full benefit of that because they don't see the project through. And then that's what gives the reward for the staff and the charities if it's seen all the way through as well.
Yeah, I think it's a mixture. So it could still be short term, but something that you don't need right now. And it's just if this happened, I think it's just having a wide range of options available. We're always looking for ways that we can do support and things like that. And for us, if in rail, your projects don't tend to last just 1 or 2 years. They tend to be long-term projects. So you'll be in an area for a fairly decent amount of time. So it's just, I suppose, keeping up dialogue as well to say these are the options that we can have, and this is what we need now, this is what we might need in a couple of years' time, and this is what we might need if you're still here in 5 years' time, just to keep up that dialogue.
Yeah. So touching on that then. So what from your from your side of things is happening within the railway industry at the moment that potentially is going to benefit the charities and the CICs locally?
So the biggest change that's going to benefit charities and CICs is that in the rail industry, it works on something called control periods. So control periods tend to be about 5 years in length, roughly. And we're currently in control period 6. Control period 7 starts in April next year. So organisations such as ours, which is a principal contractor, so that means you're a contractor of a large size that can do... So other people on that might be people like Amy, Siemens, Hitachi, that sort of thing. They'll all be principal contractors. They have a certain type of licensing that they have to fulfill all the criteria in order to be able to get those big projects, to get those big frameworks. One of the competencies, so the framework will have things that they have to do from a financial side and regulatory side, but they'll also have a series of roles that they have to provide for projects depending on the size of the value. From April next year, social value becomes one of those.
Okay.
So if it's a very large project, you might have to have somebody senior like myself.
Mm-hmm.
If it's slightly, like I'd say a medium to large side project, you could have somebody from an apprenticeship level up to an advisor level with support from somebody senior, and then other than that it's embedded advice from a head office or central point. So ultimately there will be a growth in social value people within the rail industry, which means there'll be more people to go around and more opportunities to match up and do that proper local matching and doing what I do with the Charity Hub.
Is that nationwide?
Should be, yeah. So it's any organisation that has a principal contractor's licence, it'll be the social value. Now, what I will say is there might be a little bit of a bedding in period, because it's great saying all these projects have to have these people, but then there's that work at a sector level to attract the right people, or to understand the people that are currently in a role now that don't meet all the criteria. How do you bring them up to that? So one of the things I do is, as well as the work I do at VolkerRail,
take a sip.
As well as the work I do at VolkerRail, I sit on the RSSB's Social Sustainability Working Group, which is an industry level group that's looking at things like how do you get better community engagement, how do you do better education engagement, how do you resource the extra people needed. And I've started co-chairing that, so we're starting to use that as a conduit to have those conversations now, to make it much easier when it comes in.
Right, okay. So it is actually looking quite positive then, really, for the sectors to be coming together to work together.
Yeah.
So what would you say is the best way to approach? So say for me, if I was at Eves Trust, at the time maybe a smaller charity, what's the in to come to your company to try and get that contact? Do I try and find you directly? Do I come through your receptionist? Because sometimes we just sort of get, oh, right, another charity, we'll just take your number and they'll call you back.
Yeah, I think from our point of view, I'm always open to conversation. I do a lot of work on LinkedIn, so I'll see a charity mention something, I'm right on there. We have a social value inbox, which is just socialvalue@volkerrail.co.uk. We need to do our bit to be visible and make sure people know that we're available for that as well. And that is coming from things like the Charity Hub, having that visible presence. Word of mouth's a massive thing as well. You help one charity and that opens up a conduit to another. And for me, one of the things I really want to do is, every employee is allowed to have a volunteering day. Not everybody uses them. So I need to have a breadth of opportunities and a breadth of charities, because people are human, aren't they? Yeah. And they have their own likes, and there'll be something that somebody connects with.
Absolutely.
So you just have to maximise what's there to make sure that it's appeal to people. And I do a lot of work with staff to say to them, actually, I will find you lots of opportunities. But if you have an opportunity, or if you have a charity that's close to your heart, or if you've read an article in a local press of a charity needing support, bring that to us, because we can look at that and then we can link it back to something meaningful.
Yeah. How do you see the role within CSR progressing now going forward? Now things are changing and you look at these things being implemented. How do we think that's going to progress and benefit communities more?
So, in my personal opinion, now that you're mandating more people in that role, I think the next logical step, and I don't know if it's going to happen next year, the year after, or that, will be social value assurance. So there'll be some sort of auditing process to check that people who say they've done stuff have actually done it and they've evidenced it. So I think that would be to the betterment of charities, because, like I said, most people in this role are passionate about it and they'll do it. If there are any organisations out there, I'm not talking about Rail, but in general, that can do a nice, pretty poster about how well they've done, but they don't have the evidence to back it up, this will force them to be able to do that.
Yeah.
The way social value works is you get monetary values for things you do. So there's like an hourly rate for volunteering. There's an hourly rate for community versus education versus environmental. The numbers are great on a report saying we've done, X amount of volunteering or X amount of social value. But for us, it's that qualitative piece. It's that case study. It's the so what, why did we do it? And it's the stories and who we benefited and how we benefited them. And I think there has to be a place for both, because if we're talking to people about what we do, it'll be the case studies you use and the examples, and you link it back to human stories. You wouldn't say, oh, well, last year we did 1,000 hours. So what? You'd be saying, well, last year we supported Eve's Trust and we supported these schools, and you've got to link it back to something that people can relate to, because while your numbers might be great for a boardroom or an annual report, if you're talking to people about what you can do, or you're talking to people about maybe working together, it's your stories that are more powerful.
Yeah. Do you see that shift coming? Because, I mean, I've been doing this for 12 years, 3.5 years full time, and I've heard CSR banded about most of that time.
Yeah.
And I have seen some progression, but there was definitely a lot in there. As we said, if you point out earlier, doing the tick box situation, I know that's definitely not where you're coming from with this. But do you think that is actually starting to change? I've seen a couple of big businesses that are doing that. I'm just not sure about those sort of medium-sized businesses within the communities, about whether you think they're buying into it or whether they're still seeing it as a tick box exercise.
I think the change is there. If you take the rail sector, the way work is won is on tenders. Now, it used to just be a question about social value. Are you committed to doing X, Y, and Z? It's now weighted questions. So part of your score is based on social value. It won't be the biggest score, but it's still there. And if you can imagine, if you've got 3 or 4 companies that are all capable of doing the same work, that probably come in around about the same value, sometimes it's things like your social value promises or your evidence of what you've done in the past that could swing it one way or the other. So I feel like there is that importance. There are some challenges. So whilst, yes, it's more important, yes, we've got more focus, then there's the business side where you've got to balance that with volunteering still costs money, whether it's, if it's not giving physical money, you're giving time and you're giving resources. And as committed as you are, you have to balance that between the business need and the social value need. But I think it's starting to get a little bit more gravitas and a bit more momentum.
Yeah, right. Because obviously CSR value to small charities especially is massively important, because meeting the likes of someone like yourself who has contacts, has connections, and maybe has staff that can help provide a service to the smaller charities that don't have the finances or the experience to do that. So what, from sort of your knowledge and coming to these hub meetings and talking to all these charities and all the rest of it, what do you see as sort of the biggest threat to our sector for charities and CICs going forward?
I think you'll always have that threat, because obviously you're very much grant funding, or, it's not always, you've not always got that guarantee, have you, of your longevity. I think if there's any social value people listening to that, it's understanding the pressures that small charities are on, that even if we as a social value person are under pressure to get a volunteer in for a massive group, understand the pressure that puts on charities. Think differently. So if you're asking for a big group, are there 3 or 4 charities in the same area you can support, which means that no one charity is put under too much pressure. Yeah. You still get your big numbers, but you're spreading the help further. And I think it just makes sure people have that momentum and keep going. I'm a really big believer in collaboration. So because I want to help people, if a charity came to me and said they needed help, and I know I could provide help but not everything they need, I will absolutely go to my contacts in the rail industry, even if they're in a similar role as us, yep. A similar company as us, to say, could you help with this as well? Because it doesn't take away our volunteering, it just benefits the charity double. Yep. I'm just hoping that others will do the same thing, because I think if any company can make a difference, but if 2 or 3 companies are working together, they can make an even bigger difference.
Absolutely. So, yeah, totally agree, because we're sort of trying to put the same information across the charities, because we do have to learn that we need to collaborate and come together because of the size or the tools or equipment or spaces that we have. By working together, it does have that bigger impact, and hopefully in the next couple of years, I'm hoping the CSR value will really increase now that there are the more stats and everything being assigned to that, and that actually being important. So what would you say, sort of up to date at VolkerRail, is probably your biggest achievement so far within your role?
Do you know, I've loved every minute of it, and I think I surprise people of how much I managed to do, or how much I managed to get other people to do. I had a colleague who said that I have to do a presentation in a couple of weeks' time at a conference for work, and mine's about passion in my role. And I'm a big believer that passion's infectious. Yep. And it's turning people around to actually, if somebody's not volunteered before because they've not understood the benefit, and then they've done volunteering for the first time, that's a big personal achievement for me, because I've explained to them the difference. Yeah. And I do a lot of that by trying to challenge people. If I hear somebody say, oh, it was only a couple of hours out of the office, no, it wasn't. It was massive benefit to that charity, and it's making them understand the impact that they as an individual have had. Yeah. What they're doing. And some of them, they might not see that value because they think, well, I was just in an outdoor garden doing some clearing up or that, but it's bigger than that. You've shown a small charity that there's a company out there that cares. You've helped them massively, because the biggest challenge is manpower and getting things done. And you've left that positive legacy, so people shouldn't downplay what they've done.
Do you think that's something we probably need to challenge more? Because a lot of people may know they may have that volunteering day, but again, may not know how they can actually benefit anyone. Because if they don't see themselves as being particularly skillful, or they might not even be into gardening, they might hate gardening, but be great at IT, and then you don't hear about so much these opportunities of volunteering to go and do some IT work or some administration. So do you think, from a business point of view and from the charity sector point of view, that's something we can maybe work on better and build on better to improve it?
Yeah, so for me, it is making sure there's that breadth of opportunity. So I had a colleague come to me, one of his staff members was what's known as off-rota, and they were looking for volunteering, but has hay fever. So I could have it was in the summer period, so I could have got him 1,001 outdoor things, but I couldn't. So it was just finding something different. And I think it's having that two-way conversation with employees, that sometimes they might look on our portal, because we have a portal that advertises all the volunteering. They might think, well, none of that suits me, so please come and speak to me. And if none of that suits you, just give me 2 or 3 bullet points of the things you like to do, and I can guarantee you I'll find you something.
Yeah, again, because one of the things that we're trying to put across at the hub is that charities need support in so many different ways, you know, and it's trying to get away from people just thinking that volunteering is standing with a tub asking for donations or going and digging a garden up. It's so much more than that. And I think...
And it's something we're exploring. So we're exploring, how do we use our skill sets to support charities better? So there was a charity in the Scunthorpe area that's last impact report was from 2019, because they do not have anyone currently that can do an impact report, which means that when they're applying for funding, it's based on data that's now 4 years out of date.
Yep.
So I did offer, I would happily do a volunteering with them to help them and work out what they're tracking. Are they tracking the right things? Is there anything else that they need to track? And then we can help them with an impact report, bring it up to date. That gives additional volunteering for our marketing team who can make it nice and glossy. But then the charity's not had time yet. So it's that sort of things. And I don't think it'll always be quick wins. But as long as we're looking at volunteering and thinking, we could do a volunteering that is just an outdoor thing, but when you're there, it might trigger something and think, actually, we could also help with that.
Well, I think you've touched on a really important part there on us being able to put the data down on paper.
Yeah.
Because generally we either maybe have no training in that, aren't really aware of it, or just simply don't have the time.
Yeah. And I think charities need to recognise that they do massive work that benefits society. And I think everyone's the same. They're not very good at shouting for themselves, but sometimes it's just that one extra data set that you need. So everyone's great at doing their outcomes. You could probably tell you how many volunteers you've had in the last year, how many people you've supported with your dreams at Eve's Trust. But then your impact is, for your volunteers, did you do any benchmarking at the start to see how confident they were or how happy they were? And then after they've volunteered for a year, that's your impact, that you can prove that you've taken someone with low confidence to high confidence, or low happiness to higher confidence and higher happiness. And it's just that time and understanding of your outcomes and your impact are slightly different. And I think some conflate the two. But the other thing is, we have a system that does our social value calculations, but I've done training to understand how to create a social value metric. Okay. So that's another thing that we can pass on to
Is this something you're volunteering for now?
Yeah.
Something else?
Yeah, because sometimes it doesn't have to be difficult.
Yeah.
The example would be, let's say you've taken somebody out on a coach trip, and it's somebody who's socially isolated, and you're going to do them a regular monthly coach trip. Your opposite element to that would be that person going to a coffee shop and meeting a friend for a drink. You work out the value of how much it costs them to travel, to spend time with people, how much they spent in that coffee shop, and how much they got out of that session. And then you would use that as your benchmark to then work out how much taking 40 people on a coach trip got.
Yeah, I love this, and it's definitely something. I think just having this conversation now, we need to actually have a proper
conversation.
A proper networking thing on it, because again, it's something that is massively overlooked. Coming from a personal opinion as well, it is overlooked because you're so channeled into what you're doing and trying to fit it all into the hours you don't have. Yeah, stuff like that gets overlooked, but in the long term, it's information and data like that which is going to help us succeed and get our grant funding and everything else. So and
then it's your case study data of the examples of somebody who's benefited that might help that one person who's thought of asking you for help, wasn't sure, and have seen the good that you've done for somebody else, and then they pick up the phone and then they've got the help that they need.
Yeah, exactly right. Okay. So I think we've about covered everything, but we're going to move on to what is probably the most challenging question of the day. And it's very important, so I hope you're ready. I would like to know, what is either your favourite meal or favourite cheese? Now, I'm hoping you don't go down the line of the last one with Lindsay, who says she doesn't even like cheese, which nearly got her, booted out of the building. So no pressure on you with that. But what we're going for either favourite cheese or meal?
I can combine the two, actually. So my favourite meal is pesto pasta with some vegetables topped with red Leicester cheese.
There we go. Perfect combination. Caroline, thank you very much for your time, and thank you for everything you're doing within the community and working with us at the Hub.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.